As we go through the creational process, every experience we ever have effected for ourselves throughout our lifetimes, and every individual we have had association with, will all be filed and become as the ideas of the consciousness. For it is so that we can't experience the simulation of anything absent of the ideas that are consciousness installed that effect them. These would include creational positioning, the circumstances we find ourselves in, and the body forms of others. Although, as we go through a creation, from the point where the secondary free will utilizing a personal self is established, as is necessary for the two positions to become so, that of the real awareness everything reality, and the simulated unreality of the personal self creation, that a comparative mechanism then is available by which the isness can be recognized from that which it isn't, as the secondary self somewhat becomes the overriding position, the real awareness disconnected from and forgotten until the decision to reconnect and stand as that which we all actually are is established. Until that moment, as the personal self is fully immersed into, the consciousness that it is will be fully embraced and agreed with. This agreement will incorporate then the entirety of the consciousness construct, every idea it comprises of that has affected our every lifetime of circumstance and in relation to other body forms, ever since real awareness initially selected the simulator of its choosing, took on the consciousness that is the simulator effected, and animated through the body forms as manifested from a consciousness within the simulator. Of course, then, as we hold to any idea, we are constantly the effect of it, and thus a consciousness fully agreed with is a holding to every idea of its construct, and including agreements we had established with the idea of other body forms, even millions of lifetimes ago, that even as we assume a new body form each lifetime around, and have no current memory body reference in regards to such ideas, as they then will be subconsciously placed, we maintain the ability of at any moment, any body form, and indeed any situation that are the effects of the ideas of the consciousness to feature in our experiences. The process of awareness involves a facing and releasing of the consciousness, that we move into a position where we are no longer the unconscious effect of its construct, but now can consciously decide who or what will be able to feature in our experiences. My previous place of a physical level employment would be a UK-based supermarket called Tesco, and although I have relinquished my position with them, based on how on occasion the Tesco supermarket will feature in my experiences, and including certain of the former colleagues and managers etc., apparent is it then that I still maintain a tenuous agreement link to these ideas, for whatever reason the personal self may have for doing so, that even though there may be no desire even on the part of the personal self in regards to these ideas, sometimes such agreements, even though we intend wholeheartedly to release them, they may take the moments they will to unravel. After all, a certain situation manifesting in our current lifetimes may be seeded from ideas that not only may have been agreed with who knows how many lifetimes ago, but may comprise of quite the convolution of ideas, incorporating many facets, like a tree of many branches, and required then is quite the process of disassembly, that although we may have experiences of the current expression of the idea, its roots go deep. The idea of employment, of survival through the necessity of working for others, may be a concept taken on and agreed with that could have its origins thousands of lifetimes ago, and effect manifested itself in all manner of ways throughout creation and varying body forms, with all the multitudes of other beings involved, etc. An idea to be released is seldomly isolated. We only are experiencing its current effected manifestation each lifetime around. And so I would find myself in a recreated version of a Tesco, as I occasionally will, for even as we are perhaps in the process of dismantling the agreements pertaining to such, we will be occasionally experiencing the ideas as the process proceeds. That the business world, the 9 to 5 jobs, may seem a certain way on the surface one-dimensional front, but as the entirety of all Earth systems are managed and orchestrated by the dark force reptilians, underlying it all will be the reality of a destructive overall idea, environmentally and individually wise, the dark force consciousness of an inclination and design of control, subjugation, etc., and this will be in actuality what the human race remains resigned to through the surface ideas as presented by the controllers, the overall business world that seems so beneficial and thus agreeable. For I would be operating in my usual former work capacity, but throughout the store that I was in would be hordes of twisted body forms. Naturally, the typical Earth human, immersed in the consciousness personal self, business one-dimensional illusion, unable then to see beyond the literal front to the reality behind the surface, the dark force destructive distortion that are in fact the ideas they are in agreement with. So it was in this experience, where my former work colleagues were unable to perceive the twisted body types that moved among them. I'm reminded a little of the movie They Live, where only through the sunglasses could the world be perceived as it actually was, the control it in fact represented, and that many of what seemed to be humans were in actuality rotting corpses, representing the presence of the dark force beings in their midst, that only through the sunglasses the real awareness symbolically was this apparent. The real awareness has the oversight of every idea that all consciousness comprises of, as it is part of the everything isness that permeates through it all, that the personal self can then be shown the actuality of what is behind the surface literal simulated front. This would be the case here, as the supermarket would be festooned with the demons, gargoyle-like creatures, and what appeared to be rotting corpse-like zombies, all unseen by every other former colleague that was present. Evidently these body types were expressions of the dark forces, body types that are reflecting their ill-intended and destructive consciousnesses, hence their twisted designs, At one point, I would step into my personal self, as though to sever this view as afforded through the real awareness, and all the twisted body types were suddenly rendered human. And indeed, this is how they would be perceived by the one-dimensional Tesco worker, the shape-shifted beings walking among the humans on the physical, or even if seen on the other dimensions of life and not actually present on the physical. Very likely this is how they would have appeared as on the surface, absent of the real awareness discernment, that of humans. For indeed, one of the dark force body types, in its human form, would attempt to seduce me. She would lead me into a secluded area of the building, but seemed oblivious of how I could shift my view from the personal self to the real awareness. That as I did so now, the human overlap was removed, and revealed now was a female, yes, but something that only loosely resembled a human, her skin as though made of a blackened tree bark, a mass of writhing tentacles protruding from her form. Suffice is to say, I politely declined her advances and departed from her midst. I would, however, now be in the presence of one of my former managers, and it seemed this situation became as an opportunity. For impressions revealed, she was receptive to the references of the ears, as though another individual on the verge of deciding to become more aware, and just requiring then the real references pertaining to such, the new you connection, etc. For she initially was attempting to have me execute a supermarket duty or other, but instead I would capture her attention as I began to speak of the real purpose of his recognition, the cause and effect nature of creation, the 5 bodies and so forth. For the real awareness may decide to recognize the ears, but then comes the task to bring the personal self into the picture, and oftentimes new friends may feature in their real side or physical level experiences for such a purpose, to present the real references and the new you sound to the individual. And generally then, the ideas that are all the body forms of others that have been collated within the consciousness as we have proceeded through a creation, even as we may sever agreements to them, unless they also are doing likewise, they will retain full agreement with their consciousness, including the ideas of ourselves, and present as a constant open doors, where we now can engage with all the beings we ever have encountered in the simulator in our efforts to present the new to them, or in this case, with the simulation of the supermarket and the work colleagues, effected through agreement pertaining to the ideas of them, the ideas still going through the process of being released. So this was still an opportunity to engage with the former manager, who was the only one seemingly receptive to what I was conveying. Materializing beside me would be another individual, unknown to my personal self, but impressions revealing was a being with a greater awareness than myself, and he had a unique ability where interaction with others was concerned, to creatively get the real references across that would be both engaging and easily understood. The scene would switch, and now it seemed I was constructing something on behalf of another individual. Visually, it appeared as though a vast battleship, though impressions suggested it was something other than what it seemed to be. I was a part of a group orchestrating the ship's construction, but seemed, on completion of it, it fell slightly short of the expectations of the individual, a very tall human, who had acquired our services for the building of it. However the scene would fade, I would find myself in a grand hall in the company of many other individuals. Sat beside me would be the only other individual present I would recognize, that being Jeremy. The tall man, standing on the stage at the forefront of the audience, would announce the completion of whatever it was I and the group had constructed for him, and that we were to receive recognition through our efforts. That despite they not being entirely satisfactory, they evidently were adequate. The tall man would call the group members by name. I fail to recollect the names of them, but then I myself was called to the stage, and I would stand alongside the group as we received our praise and applause from the audience. However, something was amiss, impressions suggesting that the group and I had been somewhat duped in regards to the services we had rendered. For I have shared on previous real side experiences that absent of the real awareness discernment of the situations, or the intents of the body forms in our midst, the personal self alone only is able to draw its determinations from what is occurring on the surface literal front, and can easily be misled. On occasions I have been drawn into what the personal self thought were beneficial life and awareness projects that were anything but. They instead were dark force creations for the purposes of taplining to their distorted ideas and intents, etc. Sometimes the personal self may go through dire situations through absence of the real awareness impressions as to the deceptive nature of the ideas we are agreeing with, that we then have the experience, and indeed we can have revealed to us that which we wouldn't have been shown had we determined the deceptive nature of it, and perhaps refused to extend agreement that effected the less than savoury circumstances. We can become more capable through the adversity that such experience presents as we creatively must then deal with the effects, and we can determine what agreements we may still have as yet unreleased, as we come up against situations or individuals we are unable to deal with as we face it all. This was a similar situation, in which the real awareness hadn't afforded impressions initially, that in actuality the tall being was an ill-intended alien of a kind, and what I and the group had built for him was something technological that he would use for destructive purposes. Although, as I said, our construction hadn't been completely to the alien's desired requirements, and impressions were that I was to go through this to as though oust a particular alien who had intentions of destruction, but that what we had built for him, even though he considered the work adequate, wouldn't actually afford him the destructive power he wanted, unbeknownst to him. For now, as these impressions became so, and the realization of the alien being harbouring ill intentions that effectively had him exposed, he would turn on me, and what followed was a pursuit across creation seemingly, as though he was unable to proceed with his dastardly plans due to being exposed, but little did he know that even if he should proceed with his intentions, or attempt to, the technology we had built for him wouldn't serve his destructive needs. He resorted then to directing his rage on me, but as I always reiterate, the extent by which any other being can exact harm upon us or eliminate us is dependent on agreements we have that they can. Absent of the agreement idea, then no simulation can follow. If an alien is to destroy me, the idea agreements that he can must be consciousness installed, or despite his best efforts, he will be unable. This was the case here, and his efforts in regards to my elimination proved futile, as persistent as he was, and relentless in pursuit of me across a multi-dimensional creation. It was rather entertaining in actuality, as I was in no peril, and every time he caught up with me, I simply nullified or mitigated his attempted destruction of myself. Eventually, he would determine the pointlessness of continuing in this vein, and the pursuit abated, the experience ending there. Another ill-intended alien, though one that had been posing as sincere, revealed for all of creation to see.
That was cool, Kevin. Yeah, that's a good lesson for people to understand. And that is, as they're focused on their awareness and they have this recognition, well, again, we have to deal with silly stuff, and then we just make it fun like you did. Just like in the movies, a lot of chases, etc. And so, yeah, the end result is, realistically, no, nothing can touch us because it's all a created illusion in its own way. It can affect the bodies. We have to deal with it here in the physical. And so we make adjustments accordingly, and we pay attention. That's the whole idea, is to focus and pay attention each moment. But yeah, that's a cool way to observe what is possible for anybody to be okay, and that's what we're sharing with everybody. Yes. Great, Kevin. Thank you.